Patch 329.2 dropped on August 5th, and on the surface, it reads like a cleanup patch. 40-odd bug fixes, a pile of interface tweaks, no headline balance pass.
That reading is wrong. Buried in this patch is a change to how currency actually gets generated in voyages. An admission that a modifier a lot of people have been paying for has been doing nothing at all. And a bug fix that quietly takes 2 damage supports away from an entire archetype.
Quick note before we start. This episode was generated with AI by Demades. The script is written and the voice you're hearing is synthetic, working from Grinding Gear Games' official patch notes. The thread is linked in the description, and I'd encourage you to read it yourself. This is an unofficial show. We are not affiliated with Grinding Gear Games.
One more thing up front, because it matters for how you weigh everything after it. Where I'm stating what changed, that's straight from the notes. Where I'm telling you what it means, that's me reasoning out loud, 3 days in, without the benefit of a month of data. I'll be clear about which is which.
Where we are. Curse of the Allflame launched July 24th. We're now about 2 weeks in, past 329.0b and 0.1, and this is the patch where GGG stops fixing things that were broken and starts tuning things that were merely disappointing.
You can read the shape of the league's problems directly off the fix list. An enormous share of this patch is voyages, charts, Allflame capsules, and the altars, which tells you where players have actually been spending their time, and where the friction was bad enough to be worth engineering hours 2 weeks into a league.
So let's take the changes in order of how much they should change what you do tonight, which is emphatically not the order GG listed them in.
The biggest change in this patch is the offerings to the deep altars, and it's 3 separate notes that only make sense read together.
First, the standard blessing now converts common currency to rarer currency 10% of the time, up from 4%. That's not a 10% buff. That's 2.5 times the conversion rate.
Second, the empowered version goes from 8% to 20%, same multiplier.
And third, here's the part people are going to skim past. The altars now appear less frequently.
Gay stated the reasoning outright, and I want to quote it because the intent matters. The intention is that these are significantly more noticeable when they do appear, and across many voyages, there will still be a roughly higher or equivalent number of currencies converted, assuming you are finding and interacting with these.
So read that carefully. Roughly higher or equivalent. That is GGG telling you this is approximately neutral on expected value, and the actual product is a variance change. Fewer, bigger events instead of more, smaller ones.
My read, this is a psychology patch more than an economy patch. A 4% conversion on a thing you see constantly is invisible. You never attribute a good drop to it, so it may as well not exist. A 20% conversion on a thing you see occasionally is memorable. Same currency, better game.
But there's a real cost hidden in that trade, and GGG's own phrasing flags it, assuming you are finding and interacting with these. When the events were common, missing one was noise. Now that they're rare and individually worth 2.5 times more, missing one is a genuine loss. If you've been running voyages on autopilot and skipping altars because they weren't worth the detour, that math has inverted. They're worth the detour now.
And one more line in that same cluster that's easy to miss. The conversion blessings now apply to mercenaries as well. If you're running a mercenary-heavy setup, your effective conversion throughput just went up on top of everything else.
Now, the one I'd actually lead with if I were writing GG's notes.
All right, all modifiers which previously granted increased gold found on charts will now grant increased rarity of items found, as the increased amount of gold found did not function in charts and voyages.
Read the second half of that sentence again. The increased gold found did not function. Not underperformed. Did not function.
That means for the first 2 weeks of this league, every increased gold found modifier that rolled on a chart was a dead affix. And charts are traded. People have been buying, pricing, and filtering charts on a stat line that was doing literally nothing.
I want to be careful here because I don't have market data and I'm not going to invent it. I don't know what those charts were selling for, and I don't know what they'll settle at. What I can tell you with confidence is the direction. A dead mod became a live mod, and the live mod it became is increased item rarity, which is a stat this player base has spent a decade learning to value.
So, 2 practical things. 1, if you have gold find charts sitting in a tab that you'd written off, go look at them again because they are not the item they were on August 4th. 2, if you have a loot filter or a trade search that was configured to ignore gold find rolls on charts, and if you were paying attention, you probably did, that configuration is now actively costing you.
The broader lesson, and this is the thing veterans already know, GGG's bug fix list is where the economy news lives. A line that reads like housekeeping just revalued an entire modifier class.
Abyss got 4 separate buffs in this patch, and none of them were announced as a buff.
The straightforward one increased item quantity and experience from slain elite Abyss monsters. No numbers given, so I can't tell you the magnitude, and I'm not going to guess at one.
The second is more interesting. There was a bug where abysses loyal to a Monomu would sometimes spawn lightless serpents as the elite. Those now only spawn lightless abominations, and GGG explicitly notes the abomination drops more items and grants more experience than the lightless serpent. So a fraction of your Monomu abysses were rolling the worst outcome, and that fraction is now gone. That's a silent throughput increase on top of the explicit one.
Third, and this is the Atlas passive one worth actually rebuilding a tree over. The Trial of Destruction notable rolls your number of pits twice and keeps the higher value. Previously, that only applied to the base number of pits. It now also applies to chances for additional pits. GGG names Sustained Hordes as an example.
That's a meaningful interaction change. 2 notables that people were treating as independent now compound. If you passed on Trial of Destruction because you were already invested in additional pit sources and figured they didn't stack, that reasoning was correct on August 4th and is wrong today.
Fourth, the Abyss Scarab of Crystals now creates an Abyssal Crystal on all non-final pits closing, where before it was only pits that had no reward. A straight buff to that scarab.
Put those together, and my read is that Abyss farming is materially better than it was 3 days ago. And because none of it came with a number, I don't think it's been priced in yet. That's an opinion, not a fact, but the direction of all 4 changes is the same, and none of them point down.
One caution before you go rebuild. Abysses no longer spawn inside Breach Hive encounters. If your strategy was stacking those 2, that specific overlap is gone.
Crystals of Permutations got a real mechanical change. Enshrouded items can now be charged up to 3 times, gaining variant rarity with each charge. And the higher the variant rarity, the more likely the resulting vestigial item is to be a rarer unique.
And, critically, you can break out a crystal as long as you've charged it at least once.
That second line is what makes this interesting. It's not a forced 3-charge commitment, it's a ladder you can step off. So this is now a genuine risk decision at each rung. Bank the item you can get now, or spend another charge for better odds at something rarer.
I can't do the expected value math for you because GGG didn't publish the rarity weightings, and I'm not going to fabricate them. Anyone doing precise EV on this 3 days in is making it up. What I'd say is that the shape of the decision has changed from, is this worth doing, to how far do I push it? And those are very different questions.
This is the part where the bug fix list earns its keep. 5 lines that matter more than they look.
1, and this is the big one, fixed a bug where Ruthless Support and Fist of War support were incorrectly able to support triggered slam skills.
That is a nerf. It is written as a bug fix, it is listed among the bug fixes, and it removes 2 of the largest damage multipliers in the game from every triggered slam setup. If you are running a triggered slam build, your damage went down on August 5th, and the notes did not tell you so in as many words. Go check your character.
2. Zana's Ingenuity. The monsters cannot steal your charges on hit modifier now also applies to monsters removing your charges on hit. Steal and remove were mechanically distinct, the ring only covered one of them, and the description was misleading. That's a real defensive upgrade for charge stacking builds, and it's the kind of distinction that costs people characters.
3. The Vestigial Gravebind implicit, nearby enemies killed by anyone count as being killed by you instead, did nothing. It now does something. If you dismissed that item, re-evaluate it. On-kill effects are load-bearing for whole build families.
4. The From Below notable, when granted by Reclaimed Malevolence, wasn't preventing all forms of recovery. And separately, From Below was causing skills with continuous mana costs to stop casting at 0 mana. 2 independent fixes to the same notable in one patch, which tells you it was genuinely broken.
5. For the crafters. Some spell damage modifiers had their described tiers inverted. Inverted! If you've been reading tier numbers off spell damage mods to price or craft, your reference was backwards. Also, attribute affixes on large and medium cluster jewels can now be rerolled with the Gentile's Ducat, and GGG explicitly says small cluster jewels are still broken and will be fixed later. Useful to know before you spend on one.
Let me be straight with you, because I think that's worth more than manufactured drama.
This is not a balance patch. There is no skill rebalance here, no ascendancy tuning, no economy intervention at the currency level. If you came in hoping 329.2 would address whatever you think is over or under-tuned in the League meta, it didn't, and it didn't try to.
What it is a friction patch with 3 or 4 consequential riders bolted on. Most of the runtime we just spent was on those riders, and the honest summary is that this patch is mostly quality of life, plus 1 archetype nerf that wasn't labeled as one.
The player-facing improvements are real, incidentally, even if they're not analysis-worthy. A take-all button for all-flame capsule loot, the ability to leave an all-flame encounter via backup capsule without placing every lantern, multiplayer capsule use with shared capacity, a crafting bench in the menagerie, doubled charted charts inventory in the voyage planning interface, and more wildwood wisps across the board. That's a lot of sanded edges.
What I'd watch over the next week, whether the altar variance change actually feels better in play, or just feels rarer, and whether chart prices move now that the gold modifier does something.
That was Path of Exile 329.2, posted August 5th by Kieran at Grinding Gear Games. Every claim in this episode comes from the official patch notes thread, which is linked in the description. Go read it, because I've been selective and there's a lot I skipped.
This has been a Demades production. Script written by AI, voice generated by AI, working from GGG's published notes. Unofficial, not affiliated with Grinding Gear Games.
If GGG ships another patch, there'll be another one of these. Thanks for listening.